super weird detail that I noticed as soon as I got into the neighborhood, and I'm sure you remember, which is that every business has its name spelled out in Chinese characters under the English sign.
Hey, are you making fun of our Chinatown? Go back to Philly.
Yeah, I mean, hey, the city of DC required it to make Chinatown a Chinatown. But in reality, it mostly just seems sad to me. Richard said a lot of the translations are bad too, like the one for Capital One Cafe, which
Oh no.
yeah, which is operated by Capital One, the bank, but is not a bank. It's a cafe.
And there isn't a translation into Capital One, so because it's a cafe, it's the number one cafe, it's the number one bank, and it's got good food. Well, it's not a bank. That's not a description for bank.
Incredible.
But nobody cares.
I don't think it's that people don't care, Miles. I think it's that people don't know.
Yeah, fair. But it wasn't always like that. When Richard moved here in 1978, it was a vibrant community.
Well, it's a neighborhood. We all knew each other. We went from home to home. We played in the streets. We played in the alleys. And I say this jokingly, but this is a fact. We did not have a day where we were hungry because our families, our relatives worked in restaurants. All right, after school, we'd pop into a restaurant, or we used to joke around and say, well, whose family should we rip off today for lunch? We go to the restaurant, sit down, and, auntie and uncle would feed us. All right, that was the community,
And I could take it you're not popping into Hip City Veg and getting a meal in the house.
Oh, no, not at all. Matter of fact, I hardly frequent these places now.
So, Richard's nostalgic about the late 70s, but DC's Chinatown had actually started losing Chinese residents to the suburbs years before Richard got there, in the late 60s, after the riots that followed the killing of Martin Luther King Jr.
A lot of people just started moving out of DC. People's parents were buying homes in Silver Spring mostly.
In the 1980s, in another parallel with Philly, DC built a convention center in Chinatown, which displaced a lot of residents.
My uncle had a carryout on Nice Street, right where the convention center was. When he got kicked out and by eminent domain, he retired.
And by the early 1990s, DC's Chinatown was struggling, largely for the same reasons as the rest of downtown DC was struggling: the crack epidemic and a wave of violence.
In 1990, Washington, D.C. saw more than 470 homicides, earning it the label murder capital of the U.S.
But then eventually, if I'm not mistaken, they would build an arena where I would go see the Washington Capitals play hockey.
Right, so this is when the arena enters the stage in the early 1990s. DC officials reached a deal with Abe Pollin, the owner of the Washington Capitals hockey team, and the NBA team now known as the Wizards, to move their teams from the burbs to an arena in Chinatown. Matt Blitz is a reporter at DCist who wrote a really thorough history of Chinatown and the arena.
They were talking a lot about how the arena is going to change everything, right? This is a quote from a story in 1994. This shows we're making a comeback. We're telling everybody that the lights are still on here, and I think it will change a lot, add towards to what our city is about.
And I'm getting deja vu here, Miles, because this is, of course, the exact situation Philly's in right now. DC was in it, 30 years ago. Did the locals in Chinatown oppose this arena the way locals in Philly are right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's worth pointing out that in DC, they proposed to build the arena right in Chinatown, whereas in Philly, it's just nearby. But there was reaction from the Chinese community in DC at the time. It was more mixed than what's been happening in Philly. I talked to some Chinese business owners in DC who said that they supported it in the 90s because the neighborhood was struggling and they thought it would be good for business. I know other community members were worried about change and gentrification, but the city didn't seem particularly tuned into the Chinese community, and the project went ahead full steam.
The arena, affectionately nicknamed the phone booth, transformed its surroundings almost overnight.
All of a sudden, it was green light go for opening restaurants and night spots, and it radiated out across that part of DC.
That's pretty cool.
Instantly.
Like you heard in that quote, when the MCI Arena opened in 1997, it kicked off a lot of commercial growth in the area. Violence fell, more people came in to see games, and that made the neighborhood more attractive to new groups. The Chinese population fell. In 1990, about 2/3 of the residents in the Chinatown area were Asian, according to the census. But 20 years later, less than 1/3 were. But Richard says this story's more complicated than that stat would suggest.
there was a lot of developers that came in, and offered, Chinese owners, a large sum of money, for the property. And you can't fault them for not taking those offers. I don't fault them for taking those offers. So people talk about gentrification, the forcement of Chinese out of the areas. But this was also an opportunity for second and third generation Chinese to accumulate wealth.
Okay, so people got paid.
Yeah, exactly. And this is what I think is so interesting about the story is that it's gentrification, but it's gentrification that heavily benefited Chinese people. They made good on their investments and they moved out to the suburbs. Now, most of the remaining Chinese people living in DC's Chinatown live in an affordable housing development for the elderly called the Wah Luck House. And those residents now have to take a bus into the suburbs just to go to a Chinese grocery store.
There's, Asian communities in Maryland and Virginia that has literally replaced Chinatown. They got the large grocery stores, restaurants and so forth. But I think if you look at community-wise and trying to be more inclusive, you can't forget history.
And there's one other lesson from the saga of DC's Chinatown and its sports teams, which is sports teams move to the suburbs too.
Yeah, don't remind me.
Since
What's a hair
DC's
dryer?
Chinatown Arena opened, it's hosted the Washington Wizards and the Capitals, the NHL team.
Oh, a
But
hair dryer.
apparently not for
Yeah,
much
that's what
longer.
I thought you
The
said.
team's owner is moving them out of the city to the suburbs in 2028.
What do you say to DC residents who say they feel like they're being abandoned?
I understand, and the future is going to be
They have a
fantastic.
AirPod Pro
And
silicone
they're 3.5 miles
case.
away.
Which, of course, is another
Without the
strike in
headphones.
the column for this 76ers arena in Philly, right next to its Chinatown. Are people paying attention to what might happen in DC and saying, here's another reason to not build in Philly?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But Philly and
What was the
DC
guy's name that left
are not
out
the same.
there?
Something else I heard from nearly everyone I talked to is that the fate
I
of
was
DC's
thinking of the
Chinatown
actor.
has also been driven by the fact that it's no longer a destination for new Chinese immigrants. The people most likely to work the kitchen jobs or open a restaurant themselves. And the opposite is true for Philly.
Wasn't it
It's
Bucky
become
Brewster
a magnet for
who lives in
new
Philly?
Chinese immigrants. So, I think Philly may be able to have it all. A new arena and a revitalized Market East and a thriving Chinatown. But it is worth pointing out that the kind of rich tapestry of urban life that the Philly Arena's supporters are hoping it can cultivate already exists just a couple blocks away in Philly's Chinatown. And one thing I think the DC example
I was delivering in
does
Philly
show
one time.
is that is
I
a
got
really
turned around. I
fragile
had to
thing,
make this
really easily lost.
really a
For
tight
Sue Lin
turn.
from
Made
Philly,
it.
who we
Didn't
started the
damage
episode with,
anything.
that makes it just not worth the
And
risk.
I want
I got back on the road. I was supposed to be on made right.
Chinatown.
Yeah, the guy
in America
come up
came
to
out
me,
of racism and resistance
gets on the
to
truck,
racism.
so I stopped. He says,
The society.
"I'm glad
did
you made
not-
that
they
turn
want
there
our
because
labor.
they
did
were
not
going to
want us
jack you." I said,
stay.
"Yeah,
They
I
did
saw
not want us
that."
to have offspring.
He
We stayed,
he
we fought,
waved me
we did
down for the
business,
sidewalk and
within
points
our
to all the kids
community.
down
We
there.
helped each other.
He looks at me
We
and goes, "I have
persisted.
to live with
My
this shit."
kids are born
He
here.
said, "You want to move?"
So I want Chinatown
He
to
said, "No,
be
this is
here
my home."
for them. I want Chinatown to be here for my mom and her generation. She speaks limited English, and Chinatown is her comfort.
We're
Chinatown
just
is
all
her
running out,
community.
getting ready. All I had
Well,
to do
I
is
hope
cross
for
the
Sue Lin's sake and for his
line over
mom's
there and
sake
go
that,
back around it.
that if this 76 town
They
or
would've had the
whatever it's
truck.
called goes through in
Probably should-
Philadelphia,
Would have had to get a
that
ride.
it can succeed
somehow.
where DC kind of
I had
failed
money.
and not displace its Chinatown.
Yeah, we'll see. The Philly City Council is supposed to vote on whether the arena can move forward sometime later this year.
Well, in the meantime, I guess go Sixers because the Wizards are hopeless.
Yeah, I think if there's one thing we can all agree on is that the Wizards suck and the Sixers are great. Go Sixers.
Oh, did you get the mail today? Huh? It's just a couple of ads. It's nothing. They can sit there.
Our show today was edited by Matthew Collette, fact-checked by Laura Bullard, and mixed by Patrick Boyd. It was reported and produced by Miles Bryan, Philadelphia Bureau Chief. Today Explained.
The bucket down there was funny. It had one mess on
Some
it.
of us are morning people. That's me.
It's
I'm
one that's been
Martinez
sitting
from
up there
NPR's Morning
all
Edition.
week.
And I'm Mike Lamp, your host of Morning Edition on CPR News, and I'm one of those morning people.
And I'm Juana Summers from All Things Considered, holding it down in the afternoons and evenings with a lot of help from caffeine.
It's true. I'm the host of All Things Considered on CPR
What is it?
News, Nathan Haffel.
Century.
Whatever your day looks like, whenever you
Electronics.
need news to find you,
Find us right
I've
here
heard of Century,
on
but that's
CPR
just
News and on the Colorado Public Radio app.
The arts.
marketing
In
thing.
Colorado, that includes theater, dance, music,
Or not a
visual
marketing
art, and
thing,
more. With so much happening, it can
business
be
thing.
tough to keep up. I'm CPR Arts reporter Eden Lane. Every Thursday, I shine a spotlight on what's happening and the art news you want to know across the state. The CO Arts Spotlight. Listen every Thursday during Morning Edition and All Things Considered, and read it on CPR.org.
With support from the law firm of Allen, Vallone, Wolf, Helfrich, and Factor.
This is CPR News, 89.5 FM KPRN Grand Junction, 88.3 FM KPRH Montrose, and
I was looking
88.3
at that,
FM KPYR Craig.
passport
I'm
I had.
Translators in Gunnison,
When I came in here.
K210BS, Uray,
Oh, it's one sad motherfucker.
K218BE, Parachute, K203FJ,
Wasn't smiling.
Rangeley, K216BO, and Meekin,
Didn't look happy at all.
K216BP. And online at
I don't know why, but
CPR.org.
back then I wasn't sure. I thought it was the
Support
company.
comes
But
from Comcast Business.
no, it was
helping to
everything
protect
else that was
small
bothering me.
businesses from big cyber threats with security options from Comcast Business. Restrictions apply.
I was a little confused because I forgot a lot of
Internet,
stuff.
leased router, and security edge.
Support
Hey,
comes from
we
Illegal
got two-headed
Pete's,
monster.
opening a new location in Wheat Ridge, bringing burritos, bowls, tacos, and margaritas to the neighborhoods west of Denver this February. Illegal Pete's, burritos, buddies, and beer.
Welcome to NewsHour from the BBC World Service. I'm Nuala McGovern. The United Nations has
these
urged
cool-looking
Israel
fucking
against
little
further military
microscopes that
action
you
in the city
put
of
on your
Rafah
phone.
after dozens of Palestinians were killed in an operation to rescue 2 Israeli hostages. In Rafah, there's little sense of what the future might hold.
We are just part of this madness somehow. Our cycle of life is one day. If we survive, we are lucky to live the next day.
I take it you
Also,
get a free
Germany's
prize,
Chancellor
right?
has called for European countries
my
to
5-year
dramatically
thing.
ramp up
Huh?
arms manufacturing.
My 5-year
And
thing.
we'll hear what life is like inside a mega prison in El Salvador. Plus, we mark a century of a defining sound of the jazz age, Rhapsody in Blue.
The Roaring Twenties is known as the jazz
So that blanket
age.
that I had pushed
And
up
I
against the
think
wall last night,
Rhapsody in Blue, in a funny way, sort
I
of
put it
defines
on the bed on the bottom.
But first, a bulletin of the latest
Or I
world
put the other
news.
blanket on the bottom. I put that one next to it because it was a electric blanket. If we need to
BBC
change,
News with Sue Montgomery.
do another one.
The German Chancellor
titanium
Olaf
ring.
Scholz has called
And
for
then,
a massive increase in the European production of armaments. Speaking during
the
a
blankets in there. The other
foundation
blankets I left for you to
major
wrap up
new
into them.
arms
I
manufacturing
put Ariel
plant,
on top.
Mr. Scholz said those who wanted peace
Huh?
had to be able to deter aggressors. His
Well, they got
remarks
this thing to
follow
check your
Donald
ring
Trump's
size, but you got to
election
print it out
campaign comment that he
and cut
would
out the little strip,
encourage
put it around your
Russia
finger,
to
or match
attack
a
any
current
NATO
ring to
country
the
that
little
hadn't
circle.
spent enough on defense.
Or it says, for more accurate, you can go to the local jeweler to get your ring
due to
size.
recent developments
Walmart.
that any
Yeah, that's what I was
relativizing
thinking,
of
Walmart.
NATO's collective defense guarantee is irresponsible and dangerous and is only in Russia's interests. Nobody should play or bargain with Europe's security.
The firm Mr. Scholz was visiting, Rheinmetall, says it will invest more than $300 million in the new factory. But the chief executive, Armin Paperger,
A lot of
said
stuff to
Europe
keep me
was not
busy
ready
today.
to defend itself.
I don't care when I pass that test.
Really, we
I
need
got
10 years
65.
because the stocks are empty.
65.90.
And if you really have an aggressor who wants to fight against
That's
NATO,
my highest test was
it's,
like
it's a long time.
almost. I
We are
missed the one
fine
question. I
in
didn't
3-4
answer at all.
years, yes, But to really
So I forgot. I thought I answered it, but I
The
didn't.
State Department has defended
And then I've been getting
Israeli airstrikes on
27
the city
and
of
23.
Rafah in support of Monday's
How could I
hostage
only get
rescue
23%?
operation. A State Department
They changed the
spokesman
test on
said
me.
Israel was entitled to conduct
I
the
studied
operation.
everything.
Here's Mike
So
Thompson.
I'll go spend a couple hours
Biden has
studying it.
repeatedly
I should
voiced
be able to
concern
pass it.
about the number of civilians killed by Israeli forces in Gaza.
I'm not
He's
worried about
also
it.
said the U.S. would
It's
not
not top on
support
my
a
list anymore.
full-scale offensive against Hamas in
Martha's
overcrowded
ring was
Rafah
cast in
city,
1924.
where nearly
Or that's just
1.5
the date they
million
have on it.
Palestinians are sheltering, without detailed
May 5th,
plans for the
1924.
protection of civilians. Yet, despite Hamas's claims that around 100 civilians were
Email
killed
H.
during
Johnson.
Monday's rescue of 2 male hostages, the State Department
Was it his ring?
spokesman Matt Miller said
I don't know. I found it in
Israel
the dumpster.
was well within its rights to
In the
carry out
dumpster?
the operation.
Ukraine
much
has
other
launched
jewelry.
action against protesting Polish farmers.
I
who
wonder
stopped
if
several
somebody
Ukrainian
wasn't
trucks at the
jacked to
border
get
and
through the
emptied some
evidence.
of their grain
I think
cargo
somebody
onto
died.
the road.
And the wife
Photos
didn't want
showed
the shit,
piles
so
of
she
grain
threw it out.
next to the Ukrainian lorries,
That could
which
happen
had
too.
already cleared customs.
Is that our
Prosecutors
buddy?
in Poland
No,
say
that's
they're
not our buddy. He's got a
investigating.
grill on
After
his
Russia's
car.
invasion, the European Union gave Ukrainian agricultural products tariff-free access to its markets,
Huh?
and the Polish farmers
my
say
buddy.
the grain is undercutting domestic produce.
He's mine now.
The West
I
African
know him.
regional
I know
bloc ECOWAS has sent a diplomatic mission to Senegal to discuss the
He's
postponement of
harmless.
its presidential elections. The
He
Senegalese
probably wasn't even
president
recording
Macky
you.
Sall
You just
decided
probably
to push
got
back
into
the
the
polls
picture.
earlier this month.
He was
World
recording me
News
because he
from
went
the
like this as I was
BBC.
walking by.
This is CPR News and KRCC. I'm Mike Lamp. The Colorado Springs City Council votes
looked right at
Tuesday
him,
on a
and he
resolution
smiled.
to declare that the city is not a sanctuary
Maybe he
city.
likes you.
CPR's Dan Boyd says it's a response to new immigrants arriving in Denver.
It's called a resolution protecting the security and quality of
Could be
life
'cause I
of the
record them all
citizens
the
of
time.
Colorado Springs. It says it will not spend taxpayer dollars on services related to new immigrants from the southern border. Eric Povry with
All I
the
saw was yellow
Accompaniment
jumping out of
and
the tire.
Sanctuary Coalition says it's an odd position
Or
for the
orange,
heavily
whatever,
Christian
speaking.
Colorado Springs to take.
I do find it very hypocritical when people who profess religious faith in other aspects of their lives close their door, close their hearts to people who are in need.
About 40,000 people have arrived in Denver
Yeah, that's
from the
pretty
border
sad.
in recent months. In Colorado Springs, Dan Boyce, CPR News.
Colorado athlete is now in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Retired Denver Broncos linebacker Randy Gradishar was part of the famous Orange Crush defense in the 1970s. He made the Pro
That's why I
Bowl
don't
7
recognize him.
times in 10 seasons and won
didn't either.
Defensive Player of the Year in 1978.
That's when I was a football fan.
Lunar New Year festivities were
1978, I
extra
was only a
festive
year
over
old.
the weekend. For the first time, the state officially recognized one of the biggest holidays for
I
many
didn't know anything
Asian
about football
cultures.
till I was
In
like
Denver, people who
8 or
gathered at
9,
the Far
maybe 10.
East Center
I was
had
18.
something more to celebrate. The shopping center was recently identified as a
I didn't
state
know it was a
historic
sport
site.
till then.
Mimi Luong helped make the
That's
designation
when
possible.
It's one of the first Asian
Laura and I
businesses
parted our
to be
ways.
recognized in Colorado. It's still a family-owned business, and it's a place that can share culture.
And we had our whole 3
traditions,
channels that we
and
got.
amazing flavors
So we were
from
able
all
to
the
catch
different
the
restaurants that are in here.
Local game anyway.
2024 is the year of the dragon. Metro Denver and Colorado Springs have a mostly sunny day. It should
They
be about
never,
the same tomorrow.
televised
This
the
is
Nuggets
CPR
games,
News
thank
and
God.
KRCC.
I watched a couple. Boring as fuck. Just like hockey. Hockey's really
Hello
fucking
and
boring
welcome
too.
to NewsHour from the BBC World
So is
Service, coming
baseball,
to you
for that
live
matter.
from London.
I went to a
I'm
baseball
Laura.
game.
After the
I was
rescue
excited
of
the first
two
inning,
Israeli
and then it was
hostages
just
in
like, this
Rafah,
is
in
just
southern
stupid.
Gaza,
Ended up
the Prime
fucking just
Minister of
walking
Israel,
around
Benjamin
smoking
Netanyahu,
cigarettes.
has said it shows the need for continued military pressure on Hamas.
I think for that
designated
reason
as
I
a
smoked
terror
too.
organization
That was
by
right
many
before
Western
they
governments,
opened
and they say that's necessary in order to secure
the
release
Rocky
of the
Stadium.
remaining
They were still
hostages.
playing at Mile
The
High.
rescue came during a night
Before
of
they
airstrikes
tore
that
Mile
killed
High down.
dozens of Palestinians.
Nichols
Mohammed
Arena was still
Ardea
around back
fled
then. I
from
went there
northern
for
Gaza to Rafah with his extended
Disney
family
on
in
Ice a
Rafah.
couple times.
Today he sent us this voice note.
Are there any of
describing
these
what
rocks
happened.
you're gonna miss in here if I throw them in the wood pile? In the rock pile?
hearing gunfire
Like these over here?
Just
pick 'em up and toss 'em?
area very close to us here in Rafah.
Okay.
Don't throw the little
After
ones.
that, we
Huh?
saw F-16
Don't
fighters
throw
on
little
the
ones out
skies.
because I put them
We
in my
tried to
pocket
pick
on
up
occasion.
our staff.
These?
Very simple stuff, our clothes
This one's too
and
big.
documents.
This can get tossed in.
And we
This one's
ran
too
to the
big.
street to
The
find
little
any
ones, like
area to
stuff like
hide.
this that's all polished.
We thought that the
like
IDF
that in my
starts his
pocket.
invasion to Rafah.
Well, yeah,
But
it's
after
good luck.
that, After very huge sounds of
It's beautiful rock.
executions,
Stuff like this.
we are
leave
now
that in
very
here.
lucky that we
This
You
is-
know,
still alive.
We'll never find
The
something like that
IDF
again.
is the
It's
Israel
in the
Defense
driveway.
Forces.
What's
Well,
it?
more than 1 million Palestinians are now
It's all
sheltering in
weird.
the city, which borders Egypt. And many of those are people that have moved multiple times already.
I think
in
it's
search of
melted metal.
safety. There's now no obvious safe
Probably
place to
is.
go next.
I didn't find it
There
on
have
the
been
railroad
concerns
tracks.
expressed by many in the international community to a proposed
Somebody brought
Israeli
it from a
military
railroad track.
offensive in Rafah.
And put it up
Over
in
the
Pole
past
Gulch.
few hours, the U.S. State
I found it
Department
up
has said
by
that Israel
Wyoming.
must have a credible and achievable
Probably
plan
fell out of
for
her
the
pocket.
Palestinian civilians who are there. The United
You know why I'm doing
Nations
this?
Human Rights
No.
Chief, that's Volker Turk, has
See where
said
they fall.
that such an Israeli offensive into Rafah
In
would
the
be
summertime when
terrifying
all the rocks
and that
come out
would
and
likely kill an extremely high number
I
of
remember the
civilians.
tossing those over there in
German
the
Foreign
snow.
Minister Annalena Baerbock said on X, formerly known as Twitter,
Yeah,
an
plus there's too many
offensive
rocks
by
up
the
here.
Israeli army on Rafah would be a humanitarian catastrophe. The people of Gaza
This one I would put
cannot
someplace else.
disappear into thin air.
These you want to
Here's
keep
Britain's
here,
Foreign
right?
Secretary David Cameron on how
Petrified
the
wood?
UK sees it.
We are very concerned about what
Doesn't
is
matter,
happening
throw 'em
in
on.
Rafah, because let's be clear, the people there, many of them have moved 4, 5, 6 times before getting there. And it really, we think, is impossible to see how you can fight a war amongst these people. There's nowhere for them to go. They can't go south.
Sometimes I
into
wonder if
Egypt,
you're
they
just
can't go
getting annoyed
north
with
and
me.
back to their homes, because many have been destroyed. So we are very concerned about
I
the
don't really want all
situation,
those
and we
rocks on the
want
dash,
Israel
no.
to stop and think very seriously before it takes any further action.
As the Israel Defense Forces plan
I'd
to
rather have you
expand
throw
its
'em off to the
offensive
side,
against
'cause you throw 'em
Hamas
in the
in the
middle
south
and
of
never
Gaza.
find 'em again.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu
On
has
the side,
ordered
I got
the
pieces of
military to
carpet and
prepare
stuff
to
to
evacuate
dig 'em out with.
civilians.
Never find them again. You need to leave a few up there for your phone, though, right? That's a cool one. You leave that one there.
I want to get rid of this for a while. Want to clean the stash.
What happened? Dead air.
Besides, sometimes when we come around, we're gonna have to ask for some more rocks. I thought you didn't want me to throw them in front for the gravel.
Not the little rocks that we got on the dash. That's stuff that we want to keep.
Which ones? Any of them?
I don't really want to write down. It just falls.
That'd be cool. Oh wow, look at that. That's sparkling. Isn't that cool?
It's agate. Obsidian. I wonder if it's a amber. Petrified amber. Almost looks like glass.
Oh boy.